All right. Well, welcome everyone to our It's Pop Science panel. I'm very excited to introduce you to these wonderful, wonderful authors. My name is Brittany Muclay. I'm a marketing manager here at Sourcebooks, and I am thrilled and delighted to present this panel on popular science topics by authors Bill Hammack, author of The Things We Make, Chris Ferry, author of Quantum Bullshit, Richard Mainwaring, author of What the Ear Hears and Doesn't, and also moderated by Benjamin Cohen, author of the forthcoming title, The Einstein Effect. I'm so excited to have you all here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Sure. Glad to be here.
All right, well, Benjamin, I would love to have you get started and perhaps tell us a little bit about your book, and let's get the show on the road.
Thank you. Hopefully you didn't hear I have 3 dogs in the background. Hopefully it won't cause too much trouble. So hi, my name is Benjamin Cohen. I am the author of the forthcoming book, The Einstein Effect, from Sourcebooks, How the World's Favorite Genius Got into Our Cars, Our Bathrooms, and Our Minds. And it's really all about the modern day relevance of Einstein. My elevator pitch for this is many people don't realize that Einstein is the reason we have GPS. So, anytime you get something delivered to your house, or you're in an Uber, or you get pizza delivered to your house, or an Amazon box, you have Einstein to thank for it. So really, it's a book that kind of explains how Einstein has his fingerprints in everything that we do today, from the internet to dating to all sorts of things. And no spoilers here, but I was able to track down Einstein's actual brain. It was stolen from his body during his autopsy. And I found the guy who now has it in a bunch of mason jars, and I got to hold it. So anyway, that's in the book as well. And I am joined today. I'm so excited to be joined by 3 fellow Sourcebooks pop science authors. First up is Richard. Hopefully I'm going to get this right. Richard Mainwaring. Did I get that right, Richard?
So good. Perfect.
Richard is the author of What the Ear Hears and Doesn't, Inside the Extraordinary Everyday World of Frequency. This book came out in December. Richard, where are you joining us from today?
I'm in a small city just outside, it's not outside, but about 2 hours away from London in the west, called Bath in the UK.
Oh, Bath. I watch a TV show, McDonald.
Yeah.
What's it called? McDonald's.
I know the one. Yes, I know the one.
Yeah,
yes,
it's like a murder mystery show.
That's the one. 2 detectives, and we can't get away from them. They're around us all the time.
It's a great show. Also joining us today is Chris Ferry. He's the author of Quantum Bullshit: How to Ruin Your Life with Advice from Quantum Physics. And Chris, you're joining us from Australia, right?
Yep, Sydney, Australia.
So it's Wednesday, right? It's Tuesday for you.
It's Tuesday morning, yeah. So
is there
the
anything we should know?
tomorrow.
Is there anything we should know about Tuesday that you can tell us?
Yeah, it's going to be a great day.
And then finally, we're joined by Bill Hammack, author of The Things We Make, The Unknown History of Invention from Cathedrals to Soda Cans. And I'm looking forward to talking to you about soda cans. I was watching your video about that. And this book comes out in a couple weeks in March
21st, I think. Yeah.
Right. And I forgot to mention, but Quantum Bullshit came out, I think, in January. So all of these books are either available now or available this will be available in the coming weeks. And you could order them all at your favorite online, favorite bookshop, favorite online bookstore. So we're going to be talking today, kind of an open-ended conversation about pop science, about the specific books. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We have Brittany from Sourcebooks will be monitoring that chat, and we'll try to get to some of your questions as well. So I just want to kick things off. We can go around. I gave the elevator pitch for the Einstein Effect. The 60-second elevator pitch. You're in the elevator with somebody, and you have 60 seconds to explain why they should read your book. So Richard, we'll put you up first here.
Okay, so
what's your elevator pitch?
What my elevator pitch would be, I'm teaching frequency and EQ to a lot of my students, and I was trying to use a piano to explain. So this note is like this frequency, okay, and then if you go higher, you get this frequency. And then I kind of just dropped off the end of the piano and went, why does it stop there? Hang on, if I keep going, what? How far up a piano? If I had a piano went on forever, an infinite piano, how far before I could play like the frequency of light on a rainbow? And then if I went that way, the other way, is that the right way for you on the piano? I don't know. If I went that way in the piano, how far before I could play like the rumbles of tsunamis or the lowest note in the universe? So that's the idea, is an exploration of frequency from the absolute lowest ones, but always trying to connect it to music and musical notes, because, well, I'm sure we'll get into it, but one of the problems very often is, how do you put a value on something which is all fluffy and in the air, and you can't, so that's my pitch. And I think I'm coming up to floor 30, so I'm going to have to stop now, aren't I? But
Ding.
That's basically it. The infinite piano.
Doors are opening.
The narrative is an infinite piano, and how many frequencies can we talk about as we work our way along that infinite piano?
Cool. Well, yeah, I look forward to talking to you. There's a few great stories in there I wanted to bring up later in our conversation. Chris, what about you? What's your elevator pitch for quantum bullshit?
Just quickly, actually, this reminds me of I was on in Australia. It's the ABC's, the national broadcaster, and their YouTube channel has a part called elevator pitch, and they talk with a scientist, and you're supposed to explain something in the time it takes to go up and down an elevator. Anyway, the video on YouTube shows me going up and down an elevator explaining.
Oh, really?
But we went up and down that elevator like 30 times.
That's the behind the scenes.
Yeah. Anyway, so quantum bullshit, I like to say it's this the antidote for the misunderstandings and abuses of quantum physics. So it kind of, you probably have some sort of bullshit detector already if you're into sort of science and skepticism and something like that. And this gives your bullshit detector a quantum upgrade, as it were, so you don't fall for things like quantum therapy beds and the quantum zeroid consciousness interface, which is real.
Right.
But doesn't really do anything.
Right. And Bill, tell us your elevator pitch for the things we
make. Well, this is about the most powerful problem-solving method that we humans have brought to bear on our planet. It's a method that's universal across cultures throughout history. No society has survived without some form of the engineering method, yet it is almost completely unknown to people. It's almost completely invisible. I think I called one chapter, the opening chapter, the invisible method. And alas, I have to start out with kind of a negative characterization, which is that we really have to start with engineering isn't applied science, in the sense that most people think that science discovers and then engineers do something with it. That's something maybe vague, or maybe you have a detailed understanding. But paradoxically, that's the opposite of what it is. The reason for engineering is to solve problems before we have scientific knowledge. And so the book is filled with lots of examples in which engineers preceded scientific knowledge and talking about the techniques in which they overcome uncertainty and how they define best. And there's an overlap with Richard's book. I talk about something called the magnetron, which is the heart of the microwave oven, and talk about its frequencies. And I know that's something that Richard mentions also.
By the way, I forgot to mention, you're in the United States. You're in Illinois, right?
Most people think I'm in Chicago. I'm in Urbana, Illinois. Yes. Okay. I got a note just from somebody in the UK yesterday. I'm coming to Chicago. I'll stop and visit you. And I'm like, well, that's fine, but it's like London to Birmingham. So just so you are aware of that. So yeah, where the University of Illinois is.
Bill, let's stick with you for a minute. You talk about, you mentioned the engineering method, and that's kind of like a theme that goes through your whole book. And you talk about how the engineering method is something that anybody, not even engineers, would use in their everyday life to solve problems. How would someone use the engineering method in their everyday life?
Well, so the essence of the engineering method is that it's a heuristic method. And I prefer to say rules of thumb. Rules of thumb are approximations that we would use when we're solving a problem. They are a ancient idea. Almost every language, every culture has a word for it that involves a body part. English, it's rules of thumb. I think Japanese is by the eye. Russian is by the nose, and there's a number of examples of that. And so anytime you apply a rule of thumb, an approximation, to get to a solution where you maybe don't have full or complete understanding, then you're using the engineering method.
Gotcha. Richard, I wanted to ask you something, because this is kind of like obviously this is a pop science panel, and I want to talk about the pop part of it. None of us, at least I don't think, none of us are like none of us are scientists full time, and so we're kind of writing these things. Bill gave me a look.
I am a professor of chemical engineering,
okay.
Although I think you're correct.
Well,
time.
point being, we're all four of us are writing pop science books. We're writing books that are sometimes have concepts that are hard to understand, but we're writing them for a mainstream audience. And what caught me, Richard, that was interesting about your biography is that you started off as a musician. And so I'm curious if you could explain, how did you go from being a musician with very basic knowledge of frequency to where we are today, where you're writing a book about it?
How dare you say basic knowledge? I had no knowledge at all. You're overplaying me. I think probably I'm possibly the one here who's I'm writing. I've written a pop science book, but I'm writing up. So in terms of my knowledge, I've been writing. I suspect you're all writing downwards in terms of where your knowledge is, and you're writing for you're simplifying for an audience. With mine is, I know it's a cliche, but it literally was a discovery, a journey. What would you call it? A journey of discovery. It literally was that, and I just got some science friends and went, whoa, hang on a minute here now. So even the basics of I said at the beginning about this infinite piano, and I thought, when I pitched the book, I thought that's a brilliant idea. And of course, I'll go up the top there and I'll talk about rainbows and the sound of rainbows and what would they do if you transpose them down. And I think I'd got the deal already. And then a science guru friend of mine said, hang on a minute, what are you talking about? They're not sound waves. That's a completely different wave. At which point, the whole premise of what I thought at this point the book was going to be just completely falls down. That shows the level of ignorance that I was starting with. But I think where I hope my book kind of engages is almost in the struggle. That's possibly the wrong word, but in the struggle I have to, one, understand, and two, I have to bring that into a language which I understand, and I've done that through music. So I say, hang on, that frequency actually is a bit like this note or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I found three stories when I was in the middle of teaching this to students about EQ and equalization in the studio. I found a few stories which were like, wow, oh my God, I never knew that. And then I had two or three, and I thought, there might be a book here. Never ever expecting that someone would go, what a great book that could be. So that really was then a scrabble for a journey. I'm not interested in everything. Things fascinate me, but that's kind of where the book comes from. Is right. Let's go and find some stories. Let's link them to this narrative of this infinite piano. But as we're going along, then how far can I go up my knowledge and link it to music and just make it entertaining and if I can understand it, then if I go through these set of metaphors or analogies, then hopefully you can understand it as a reader.
Yeah, I think that's something that you kind of runs through all of our books. Just to pinpoint where you were saying, you're talking about all these different stories, and I think when you're writing a science book for the mainstream, it's not a textbook. It's a series of stories, examples. And I think each of our books kind of works through that. So it's almost very digestible, I think, for the mainstream reader.
Yeah, I have to say, I find that this the popularization aspect is really what is interesting to me about what we do. When what gets me out of the bed in the morning is just the desire to explain something clearly to somebody. And I can't tell you why that's interesting to me, but it really is, and that's the main driving force. And well, I kind of implied I had credential there. I don't talk about topics that I deal with every day and have to spend a lot of time learning about them, which is fun. I'm not an electrical engineer, and we talk about electrical engineering things. And in fact, one of the things we do, I have a series of videos that go with this book, and I just got feedback. We send it out to about 1,700 people. I have 23 pages of errors to fix in those videos in the next 2 weeks, right? Where I was unclear, or you flip the fins on this, and the rotor and things. But I think it's really that popular aspect with a small p that is the intellectually exciting part to me.
Yeah. Chris, I want to bring you into this conversation because you have your background is you've written a lot of science books for kids. And then this is almost the exact opposite approach. We have the curse-filled approach. It's not just the title, people. If you just read the first 30 pages, there's probably curse words almost on every page. Tell me about the decision to include cursing and to make it more, I guess, for a general audience.
Yeah, so the children's books, I felt somewhat surprisingly that it hit a really broad audience. As you mentioned, you bought one for yourself,
right? General relativity for babies.
So, but there's a market segment there that they don't work for, and this is like young undergraduate physics students who would open that book and say, no, I just learned that I know everything, and that part there is wrong. So that sort of young adult market, my children's books don't really enter into, and I thought, what are they into? Especially when I wrote it, it was like 2020. So yeah, I thought it kind of hit the zeitgeist of the time, and I just wanted to reach a broader audience. Plus, it's kind of that's kind of my humor. I mean, I don't swear in front of children. There's a different
Chris, can I ask?
There's a different Dr. Chris.
Chris, can I ask? Was it really liberating to do that? To just write it away, just set free.
Yeah. Well, I have a blog, and the blog isn't child friendly either. So I had been kind of writing like that, and that's sort of, like I said, that's the humor that I have with my friends, and so it was fun. I enjoyed it for sure.
There's like a cadence, almost, and a rhythm to your writing. It's just like you're tearing. To me, it's like you're tearing down the walls between the reader and the author, where it's like, I'm just talking to you like in a bar, and like, here's what you're not going to believe this story. You mentioned 2020. I'm curious. I think all of us wrote our books during the pandemic. Was that a challenge in any way? Who wants to take that?
I didn't exactly. I started it before and had to stop it. My wife it was in a profession that she could not be with us for most of the shutdown, and I have 2 small children. And in the acknowledgments for mine, I thank the groundskeepers of Japan House. It's a park here that the kids could play in, because they could run and I could watch them, and I could still at least think about the book and keep the thread alive. So I thank the anonymous groundkeepers. So some before, some after, but during the lockdown, it was very difficult to do. Yeah.
Chris, Rich, what about did the pandemic at all play at all in your reporting or researching the book?
Chris, do you want to go first?
Yeah, not really. I mean, I'm a theoretical physicist, so my life is just a computer and a pen and a piece of paper. So it honestly, things really didn't change much for me. Yeah. So I'm not sure if there probably would have been less swear words. Say that.
I started mine in 2016 was when I found the first story about this whale that was singing at 52 hertz. So, and I just chipped away at it for a number of years. And I think I was starting to come towards the end of it during lockdown. And I mean, because I do a lot of teaching as well. So actually, it was from a writing point of view, it was quite good, because I do my lesson and wouldn't have a lot of staff around me, or all that kind of other stuff that goes with it. So and I could still do online interviews and all of that. So it was it didn't really slow anything down, I have to say.
I missed 2 deadlines because I like to do experiential journalism, where I go out in the field and be with my subjects and spend a couple days with my subjects. And so there was too many Zoom calls. I had to get offline and do some of that stuff.
Because I it's the first book I've written, so it took me probably 6 months before I actually had made contact with anyone, because I was so scared, assuming people would just go, who are you, number one, and what the hell what are you talking about? Well, so I was too scared to even ask people for about the first 6 months. And then when I did my first one, it was such a buzz that some this expert, Diana Deutsch, this psychologist, was prepared to speak to me. Oh my! I was going around the house going, "This is a scientist. There's somebody inside has spoken to me." It was brilliant. It's just fantastic.
That's always a good feeling. Yeah. I interviewed an astronomer at Harvard, and I'm like, "Holy cow!" I want to talk a little bit specifics about each of your books. Richard, the story that really caught my attention in your book was this incident in 2011. Where there's a skyscraper, you tell the story in South Korea, and the skyscraper began to shake uncontrollably. And a lot of people thought maybe it was an earthquake, but it turns out it was because 23 people were participating in a fitness class in a gym on the 12th floor. And so I wonder if you can explain to all of us what the heck happened.
Oh, this scares me now, because there's a load of scientists around, and now I'm going to try and explain this. Right. So basically what happens is, a bit like, I suppose, So these people are on the 11th floor, and they're doing Taibo, which is this mix of martial art and kind of keep fit and all of that. And they're dancing to, it's rather ironic, that Snap song, "You've Got the Power," which they did turn out to have the power. So what they're doing, they're all stepping and then stepping back the other way, stepping this way, stepping back like that. And it just so happens, a bit like, I suppose, when you push a kid on a swing, I mean, you push it, you push your kid on the swing, and then they swing back, and then you push them as they're going again. What you don't do is you don't thump them in the back as they come back at you. So in essence, they push the building this way, and then the building, just very slightly, because buildings are made to do this. Bill will, I'm sure, will jump in at this, but buildings are made to do that. They don't just stand rigid. So that building really imperceptibly just moves very slightly. And of course, then they push the other way, just like on that swing, just at that point back the other way. And then they push it again the other. So they're like pushing this little kid in equivalent terms. And they just keep doing it. The more they do it, the more they're just amplifying this motion back and forth, until the point where, because that's the resonant frequency of this particular building. Yeah. So they just happen to hit on this. And of course, then there's people above going, "What the hell's going on?" And everyone's running down the stairs, and they shut the building down, and they're looking around, what's good. We're all outside, but it's okay. Nobody else seems to be affected by it. So it's that, and all objects have a resonant frequency, and it's about finding that. I've got one. Look, I could actually do it here in front of me, couldn't I? We do this and we do that. We put it in, and if I can get that, I need to wet my finger a bit more. But I need some water in it, possibly. It's full of old beer. Let me find out. I'll get it to go in a minute. That's the problem. I wasn't meaning to set it up, but that's basically what it's like, the opera glass trick. It's the same type of thing, that object starts to wobble and you amplify it, and off it goes. And that was that's what happened to that building. And of course, the way then you have to think, right, that in a sense, it's got a note. So you have to tune your dampers, and then I'm really getting out of my, my kind of area now. But the Millennium Bridge in London, again, uses dampers tuned, which will absorb those frequencies and stop that resonance happening. And they use all kinds of different dampers in buildings and in bridges then to stop that ability for you to keep pushing against at that same frequency.
Is it because they were doing Taibo and they were all in unison?
Yes, they're all moving together. So there's 20 odd of them. And of course, on the Millennium Bridge in London, that footbridge, what happened was they, some people start moving that way. So the bridge just starts to wobble that way. And of course, when you're on a bridge, if a bridge moves slightly, your natural reaction is to go, whoa, I wasn't expecting that. So then, of course, literally thousands of people on this bridge all start to go, whoa, at the same time, which just amplifies the swing even more, because they're all doing it at the same time. So before you know it, thousands of people are then pushing this bridge back and forth. And that's why there's another bridge in London where there's a plaque up which says, and that's where it comes from, breaking step, that all military people, all kind of, when you're crossing a bridge, you break step. You don't march across a bridge. There are a number of disasters that I've written about in the book, where soldiers have marched in step across a bridge, and of course they started, and of course they move more with that, and they amplify that frequency, and then bridges are made for some swinging, but not that much, and that eventually then can lead to catastrophe, because the structurally that it's not made to do that. So yeah, bridges. That's why all soldiers will be expected to break step. In other words, just randomly walk across. Don't all walk across together.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's crazy. You don't think about these things until it goes wrong.
Until it goes wrong. Absolutely.
Chris, in your book, just to dive in a little bit, you mentioned at the beginning of our talk today how we're all faced with quantum bullshit and stuff that people are trying to sell us, or people are trying to convince us has to do with quantum physics. Can you give us some examples of quantum bullshit that you take down in your book?
Well, I think maybe actually to bring it back to this conversation, because the concept of waves is prevalent in quantum physics, and actually there's a lot of sort of bullshit surrounding waves as well. So you might hear things like if you want money, then you just think about money, and then you'll resonate with the money, and then money will appear. I don't know the mechanics of it, but eventually you'll end up with money, is what they'll say. Or it also comes into like relationship advice, and you'll use words like quantum entanglement, and that's somehow supposed to be mediated through quantum waves. Those are never really explained, although they are a thing. So I give some examples of this in the book, and the explanation for why that doesn't work really goes back to what Richard was saying, right? That all things resonate to various wavelengths. So the frequencies with which you can hear, like the frequencies on the piano, make parts of your ear vibrate, resonate, and your whole body will resonate to about, I think it's about 10 hertz. Does that sound about right, Richard?
It tends to look at this. I still am picturing myself that I'm actually talking to a man of this ability. But there are different areas about the research I read, where the different areas will resonate, will have resonant frequencies, but it's all squidgy, so it doesn't.
Sure, yeah. But and then to bring it back to Bill, like engineers know this very well, right? Another one would be electromagnetic waves, and we hear kind of bullshit about you might get poisoning from your Wi-Fi or something like that. But if engineers, they don't want to create signals that interact with your body because you're in the way, right? Imagine you have an airplane full of 300 people and you're trying to get internet for everyone in the plane. It's not that you care about their health of the people, it's that you care that they're going to get internet access, and so you don't use the wavelengths that would interact with the body. So there's obviously there's safety concerns, but there's efficiency concerns as well. So engineers have figured this all out, and a lot of the a major theme in bullshit about science, and especially quantum physics online, is that there's this one rogue scientist that or this one person that scientists don't want you to know about, who has figured something out, going against thousands of years and hundreds of thousands of engineers and scientists' knowledge, right? So there's some, let's say, rules of thumb to avoid such things, right? If it's going against the scientific consensus, then you should probably have your bullshit detectors on high alert. I mentioned at the beginning the quantum zeroid consciousness interface. So that, I think, is I guess fun's not the right word for some of these things, but it's funny in a sort of dark humor sort of way. So it's like this little electrical device. You build it with Radio Shack parts in buying some electronics, sticking it together, and then outside of the machine, you're supposed to stick little electrodes on your body. So imagine like an EEG or something from a sci-fi movie. You got this little box and these little electrodes. You probably want to stick them on your brain because that's where consciousness is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you do that, and then you turn it on, and then there's like little lights and stuff, and it blinks, and sometimes the upgraded version will have sound. And it'll say, well, here's your quantum energy profile, but none of that is real, right? The point is actually that it does nothing, because if it did something, then you might harm someone, and then your device would be in the news, and people wouldn't buy it. So you need to keep it subtle and allow people's imagination to run with it, right? But the problem with this particular thing was the person who created it sold a lot of them, and at least one ended up in a hospital in the US. And then there was 2 cases of people being sold on the idea that the device was going to treat their ailments, which was fatal, as opposed to using real medicine. So a few people ended up dying, not from using the device, but from using it in lieu of seeking medical attention. And then the device was banned, and that person is now a fugitive, living in Budapest, still making and selling the device in Europe.
Yeah, it's interesting. First, I just want to point out, if there's a chat, if you want to add questions, if anyone who's watching wants to ask any of the authors questions, feel free to put those in the chat. Chris, you mentioned rule of thumb, and I want to bring Bill into this conversation because he writes about rule of thumb. We're all dealing with this era of the death of expertise, where everyone with a social media account thinks they're an expert in this. We saw it, unfortunately, with during the pandemic, people talking about COVID remedies and all sorts of things like that. Bill, can you talk about Can you talk about the rule of thumb and how you describe that?
Yeah, so a rule of thumb I mentioned use the word heuristic. A rule of thumb is something that is likely to give you a correct answer, but not guaranteed. And they're used to guide you to a solution. And maybe their most useful thing is they eliminate certain solutions for you and tell you what directions not to go or what directions to go. To take a non-engineering one, my older son is in chess club, and in chess club, if you learn that you control the center of the board, you will typically win more games or do better than people who don't know that heuristic. Now, only controlling the center of the board won't win you every game by any means, right? It's one of several rules. It can even be contradicted by other rules. But it is a useful one to get you closer to a solution. So there's kind of different classes of these rules of thumb. I mean, the obvious ones are ones that have a particular specific body of information. I don't know, the factor of safety, use a factor of 2 for the bolts in an elevated walkway, make them twice as strong as you think they need to be. So the engineers have codes and codes of these rules. Another one is unarticulated knowledge, and that's a class that captures or is passed down through the centuries. These are often recipes, how Romans made concrete, how you size an arch correctly in a cathedral, so that it doesn't collapse without understanding the material, without understanding the properties of stone. And there's other rules of thumb that guide you in solving a problem. At some point in the project, freeze the design is one, or quantify or all express all numbers as variables, or work at the margins of solvable problems. Or to get back to Richard's book, a physicist once told me that if you want to measure something accurately, a good rule of thumb is to measure time instead of, distance or whatever else you're measuring. And of course, time is frequency. So if you can measure frequency, you can measure it much more precisely.
Can I just add one more of those? The one that I came across, which was absolutely just, and people, in fact, yesterday, someone said to me, Chris, what you were just saying, someone said to me, I went to an exhibition and there were loads of science books out. And I said, hey, you want to have my book? You want to, and he said, what's it about frequency? I said, oh, no, listen now, 432 hertz. That is the one you want. All this music is tuned. All the music we listen to is tuned to the wrong frequency, because that's the frequency of the universe, because it's divisible by 2 and you get down to 1. And that one is one of those ones which apparently, these conspiracy theories then go around. The Goebbels brought that in, and we're all brainwashed by using an A at 440 hertz. And if we brought our music down just a tiny bit and tuned it to A's to 432 hertz, that suddenly, I don't know what we'd all start to be able to tune into the universe. It's that type, I think, Chris, is what you're on about, isn't it? It's that type of. I say in the book, I retuned the Birdie song. There's something else. A really awful song. I retuned that down to 432 hertz, and I tell you this much: I didn't get any closer to the meaning of the universe than if it was at 440 hertz. So yeah, so many people jump on these bandwagons.
Maybe that one's only to cure your flatulence, though. I think that's the right frequency.
Yes.
It's funny. I have a chapter in my book about how Einstein had to deal with fake news, even back in his day, because there were, scientists who didn't like, who either A, wanted to take credit for something for relativity, or who B, thought he was nuts. And so they had a whole anti-relativity society and would put out leaflets, making things up about Einstein. So it's like, dealing with false information is, sadly, it's something we're all it's been around for a while.
I loved your book, and I also have, even in my videos, used Einstein as a reference point. I did a video on the drinking bird, the bird that tips back and forth. All right.
Yeah.
And went into the science, if you will, behind how it works, and pointed out that Einstein was puzzled by it. Right. And found this so amazing that I actually put the source in the video so people could go look it up themselves. But it ties in with your book, and that's a reference point. And when I mentioned Einstein, there was quite a bit of attention, wasn't there, about this phenomenon? Right. If he couldn't figure it out, by God, what did that mean? And so I stuck that in there.
Yeah. Speaking of which, and not to, obviously the name of our publisher is Sourcebooks, but all of us have countless pages of sources in the back of our books. When I was trying to make an announcement, people are trying to type in the chat, and they say the chat is disabled. But there is also, if you're having problems, there's also a Q&A box, and you could put some questions in the Q&A box. That seems to be working just fine. Bill, I promised at the beginning of this. I just got a note. The chat has been fixed as well.
I see.
Good.
That.
How many pop science authors does it take to fix a jet? Bill, I mentioned at the beginning, I promised our viewers that you would. There's this video that you talked about, the videos you're making on YouTube, and one of your most popular ones, I think it has, last I checked, 17 million views. It was fascinating. I really encourage everyone to watch it. It's 11 minutes long, and it's about why the soda can, how the soda can came to be, and why it's such a perfect vessel for a drink. And I'm wondering if you could briefly explain why a soda can is such a clever design.
Well, so first of all, that is a classic kind of thing that I like to do, in that I want to take the most mundane thing possible, the most ubiquitous thing, the thing we didn't look at, and highlight the creative engineering that went behind it, right? And so that is really a paradigm for that. We like to describe it as 11 minutes of an obese middle-aged man talking about a pop can, and use that as an example. And Richard, I'm sorry, I know you've worked with the BBC of what new media can do, because any producer in the world would say, well, we can't have this. We can't have this at all, right? But instead, we just make it, we put it out there, and we see what happens. So we talk about why it's cylindrical instead of square or spherical. And that gets us to the constraints of what a consumer would like. A round one would roll away. A square one would be more convenient, but very hard to make. And so they compromise with a cylindrical shape, but yet a kind of a rectangular profile. And we go a little bit into the manufacturing. But to me, the most interesting part was the pop top, that stay on tab. And I interviewed, not in this video, but long, long ago, the person who invented it, that was building toilet seat sized versions of this. And he would build them out of cardboard and tinfoil and test them. And what really dawned on him was that lever is not supposed to push the tab, the insert down, but to open up the opening so it can fall through. And the class of the lever changes as you open it, because it has to do different things. And to me, that was the most interesting part of the whole research, and the most surprising thing to come across, because how many have we pulled and never thought about? The other part that no one ever noticed, and I didn't notice, is there's a number on the bottom of every can. And I'd never seen that before, but they're stamped there because they're part of the production, right?
A unique number.
Yeah. Well,
wow.
I mean, they're from a batch. They're a batch
Right.
number, so they can trace defects and things, because they make 100 billion of these or something a year.
Wow.
Something.
And that number is printed by that system of printing, I think, was invented by the guy who was doing ultrasound. And he couldn't find out. Is that true, Bill?
Well, I don't know if it's the guy, but it certainly is that, because it is that. I did a video on it. It's the not injection printing. I can't remember the name of it now, but how they print a billion, and they electrostatically move the drop around. Yeah. It's a fascinating thing.
You could learn more about the soda can in Bill's book, The Things We Make. We got a question from a viewer, Kristen Cox. This is for Richard. Let's see if I can get through this without laughing. She says, why focus on the sounds of a piano can make and not another instrument like a violin or even a xylophone? And she has a part two of her question.
Oh, is that? Oh, yes.
Part two of her question.
Also, is it true that there's a frequency?
Is it true that there's a frequency that can make you shit yourself? I heard stories about it being true, but I want to know for sure.
So that's the brown note frequency. It's called. So you can
I'll mute myself.
So there's like white noise, and there's pink noise, and then some people say there's brown noise as well. That's not true. Everything I've looked at, that is not true. Chris or any of you just want to join in on that one, but I couldn't find any evidence of that at all. And why a piano? I think I went with the piano because it's got the biggest range. If you do a violin, if you try and again, it's back to this idea of being able to explain something. A violin is a bit of a mystery to most people. I mean, it's my instrument, but it's a mystery because it doesn't have any. When you look at it, there's no visual sense of everything being divided up equally like that. Although it's not equally divided up in terms of frequency anyway, but we won't get into that. But yeah, so that's why I chose a piano, because graphically you can see what's in front of you, and a xylophone is just not as pretty as a piano.
And for the record, you said there is not a note that can make you go to the bathroom.
No, no, I don't think there is. Absolutely not.
While we're on the topic, oh, sorry.
I think you're supposed to say your favorite band. That's what you're supposed to say.
I just went like this. I went, possibly not.
So I can't sleep without ambient noise. And I use brown noise on an iPhone app. It seems it's a little more soothing than white noise. Is there any science behind which noise would be better for you to sleep to?
I'm just worried about how often you wash your sheets. That's all I'd say. Probably. Oh, that's just people getting a bit grim now. I would. That's kind of all of that. That's slightly out of my. I'd be talking. Okay. If I don't know, but I don't. Okay. I mean, I like silence. Some people like. My kids won't go to sleep without audiobooks. Yeah, some people like that. I think whatever gets you to sleep at night, go with it. If it's brown, pink, purple noise, I don't, go with
train tracks, birds,
whatever you want.
Yeah. We still have a few minutes left, so if you have a question, please put it in the chat, and we'll try to get to it. Chris, I know you teach quantum physics, right?
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if there was anything. Obviously, you're an expert in the field, and you wrote a book about it. But I'm wondering if there was anything surprising that you discovered during the writing of your book that was surprising even to you.
Yeah, I mean, I to be honest, when I write, it's a selfish endeavor. I write for myself because I feel like the process of explaining something to someone else allows me to understand it better. And so I keep writing about quantum physics so that I can understand it better myself. And there's nothing that comes to mind that was like, oh, I didn't know that before, but it was more like trying to come up with analogies and different ways of explaining things in sometimes simple terms helps me understand, right? It's like I create a story, my own personal story about quantum physics. And every time I write about it, I'm adding to this story. And so, I can be somewhat comfortable with my understanding of quantum physics, mostly through this process of writing. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much to how much I can how much of that is responsible for like my understanding. Because I often tell people, quantum physics is quite simple, right? It's like literally one equation. And you learn some of the mathematics behind it and then learn the one equation and then all of quantum physics. It's stuff like pop cans, right? That are complicated, right? So I think the problem with that we as popularizers of quantum physics have is that we are holding ourselves to a much higher standard than everything, literally everything else, right? Like, I'll say things like, I don't know how a doorknob works, right? Like, I know how to use it. Like, I'm not going to be stuck in this room. But if you said, okay, erase all the doorknobs and now build a new one from scratch, I'd probably have some trouble figuring out how to do that. So it's all the stuff that we're like used to using that we feel comfortable in our understanding of, and we're just not used to using quantum physics, although we use it obviously every day, but not at that sort of visceral level. So we feel like we don't understand it, but in reality, we're all just lost in the dark about everything. The starting point is we basically understand nothing. There's a few things we do understand, and everything else is the collective intelligence of all the people on Earth.
Right. Bill, your book talks about so many of our everyday things. Chris just mentioned doorknobs, and it got me thinking. Your book talks about buildings and soda cans and all these things. Are you able to relax when you go through the world? Like, because are you always thinking like, oh, this is how this, this is how this pen operates. This is how this book operates.
Well, kind of. First of all, I actually don't know any of this stuff before I look into it. Right. So, Richard mentioned this beginning, are you writing down, are these the things that you know? I had no idea how you size a cathedral wall, how directed evolution worked, which is something I discussed, and I have to learn it all. And so, usually it starts with picking something up and asking, why does it look like it does? Why is this indentation there? Or why, what aspect of it is, tells a story about it.
Right.
So, but I am looking all of the time. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. We have a question from the audience, and this is for anyone. In the age of misinformation, false claims, and fake news, what role do you see pop science writing playing in the future of the sharing of knowledge and the popularization of science? That's a great question for this panel.
It's a great question.
Richard, do you want to start that off?
Yeah, first question, what role do you see pop science? I think it's just countering, as Chris talks about, just countering, although it's quite ironic that there's a story that I kind of talk about in the book, which Bill then to do the magnetron and the microphone, and because I did mine and I read Bill's afterwards, and he says, of course, these really kind of lazy people who just talk about just one person coming up with this idea, but it's not like that and that. Oh my God, that's exactly what I've done, But in general, I'd say just this idea that for when I'm been so fascinated and just privileged to meet so many great scientists and talk to people who have so much knowledge about what they do, but if I'm in any way helping to bridge that gap between a general person's amount of science and that, if I'm doing something there which bridges the gap, which stops other people, I'm not doing it for this reason. I wrote it because I was fascinated by it. But if I'm helping to stop the nonsense that's sometimes talked, then that the more of understanding people have, the more they will realize. They'll say, no, that's absolutely rubbish because I've read this and this makes sense. And other people are saying this as well, and I think if I can counter some of that through by making that bridge, then I will die a happy man.
Chris, Bill, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the just the much bigger picture of all of these books, and I know particularly for me, is that part of the goal is to demystify, to ground all of this in human practice, because ultimately, it's very hopeful, but ultimately you want a public that can control the science and technologies that shape their lives so intimately, so deeply, so lastingly, if you will. And that is part of the goal. And I think the other part, at least for me, is that by exposing what engineers do, I think that it encourages people to see it as a creative profession and to create the next generation who can solve the problems that our world faces. So I think there's a very, very big reason to do popular science.
Yeah. Chris, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. So I guess my book's ostensibly about countering misinformation, but I can tell you in going through the process that can't be what popular science is about, because it's so easy to create misinformation. And if it takes somebody with a PhD to counter it, then it's just it's an uphill battle you're never going to win. So that can't be the role of popular science, I think. And just because it has the word science in it doesn't mean everything you hear from a science popularizer is correct either, right?
Right.
So I think what we need to do as science popularizers is to, building on what Bill said, was to tell the human story, right? Like the science is a story about curiosity and problem solving. And if you take this attitude that you see a problem in the world, or you have a question and you want it answered, what's the best tool to go about answering it? Well, it's the tools of science, right? Science isn't a collection of facts. Like, you shouldn't read these books because you want to have more facts about the world, right? Science is about this method of investigating and answering questions and solving problems. And, these books should be inspiring stories to help you solve your own problems. I think that's the role that science popularization should play.
And I've discovered it's just great fun. I'm just, it's just brilliant. And I'm not, as I said, I've come to this quite late. Did physics at school for a bit. And then I've come to it going, oh my God, this, and I have such an incredible respect for those people who spend their lives asking questions and try, it's, people, I want to write a song. Yeah, that's great. And because I'm in love and all of that. That's great. And fabulous. But I've kind of done that. And now to discover all these people who just for them, rat's whiskers are the big thing they're spending 6 years of their life on. And then what amazing people. And then you discover just what, brilliant stuff they've discovered. Like, what, you mean rat's whiskers are tuned? What the hell, it's so entertaining. It's so fabulous.
We got just a couple minutes left. We have one more question. See if we can squeeze this one in from Janice Ford. She asks, do you have any ways to encourage science or pop science to females in underserved populations? Maybe we may have one time for one of who wants to tackle that one.
Well, one way is, I suppose, not like this. You want to have, people that you can identify with, and I mean, you got some great hair, Benjamin, but I think the rest of us can. So you got 4 balding white men. That's not the right way. So we need, I suppose, more leaders that have that represent a broader audience, and that way, if say a young woman, like say my daughter, sees them, they might say, I can see myself there.
Right.
She's 13 and into, well, I don't know, she's hiding in her room, but she doesn't look like me, right? So how can she see herself in that role, right? So I think we need to see a broader representation of leaders in science popularization, and that might be the sort of first thing that we can do. I mean, there's obviously not one magic solution to this.
And I think it's important to note also that, I mean, all 4 of us come from different backgrounds. And so, you're a musician, I'm a journalist, you're both professors, that there are so many ways, especially when you're talking about pop science, there are so many ways to come to the table from different backgrounds. And so I think that's actually what makes it neat, is that it's not just for a PhD in a lab coat. It can really be anyone from any field, joining that conversation.
In my book, I do mention and tackle some of the issues with diversity, and mention that in the context of the engineering method. And several of the stories feature women who invented and changed things, and but that is an explicit subject of one of the chapters in the book.
Perfect time to say the things we make is available for pre-order now, coming up. I think you said March 21st.
Yes.
But available for pre-order now. We just got to wrap things up. I know we could probably talk for much longer than the allotted time. Maybe we'll have a second session. Quantum Bullshit came out in January by Chris, and that is available anywhere great books are sold. And then Richard's book, What the Ear Hears, I think came out in December and is also available wherever great books are sold. And a personal plug, The Einstein Effect by me comes out in July and is also available for pre-order. I want to thank Richard, Chris, and Bill for joining me today. And I want to thank Brittany and Madeline. Hey, Brittany, from Sourcebooks, for putting this whole event together. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for joining us. This has been such a great panel and so wonderful. Fantastic discussion. I've learned more things now, I think, in the last hour than I probably did during my 2 years as a molecular biology major in undergrad. But that might be because this is an 8:30 a.m. lecture. So, hit or miss there. So thank you all for your time. We have a recording of this webinar. We will be posting it to our YouTube page so you can share it with folks who weren't able to tune in. As all of our fabulous authors have said, books are on sale and available wherever great books are sold. And thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.